Lady Alara Vostel looked out through the viewport as her personal shuttle approached the human space station. The massive ring-shaped structure rotated slowly against the backdrop of Earth, a blue-green planet that the Caldari had only recently decided was worth their attention. Alara straightened her ceremonial cape, which shimmered with the bioluminescent patterns that marked her as one of the highest-ranking nobles in the Caldari Imperium. For over 2,000 years, her bloodline had served as diplomats and emissaries, but never before had they been sent to deal with a species so primitive. "We will dock in 5 minutes, High Emissary," her pilot announced with the proper tone of deference. Alara nodded without speaking. She didn't need to respond to those beneath her station. The 4 Caldari guards standing at attention behind her would ensure her safety among the humans. Their exoskeletons were enhanced with the latest defensive technology, making them nearly invulnerable to the crude weapons humans might possess. The shuttle docked with a gentle bump. Alara took a deep breath, preparing herself for the first face-to-face diplomatic meeting between the Caldari Imperium and Earth's united planetary government. These talks would determine if humans would be permitted limited access to Caldari, trade routes, or if they would be isolated for another century. Until they had properly developed, the airlock hissed open. Alara stepped forward, her guards falling into formation around her. She expected to see a delegation of human officials waiting to greet her with the elaborate ceremony her status demanded. Instead, there was only a small welcoming party. At its center stood a human male in a dark blue uniform with minimal decorations. He stepped forward while the others remained back. "Lady Vostel, welcome to Unity Station. I'm Jack Miller, head of your security detail during your stay." Alara blinked her large, multifaceted eyes in confusion. "Security detail? I have brought my own guards, as is proper." Jack nodded. "Yes, ma'am. Your guards are welcome to stay with you in your quarters and private areas. But station protocol requires human security for all visiting dignitaries when in public or shared spaces." "This is unacceptable," Alara said, the luminescent patterns on her exoskeleton flashing with displeasure. "I was not informed of this requirement." "It was in the diplomatic packet sent 3 weeks ago," Jack said without changing his expression. "Page 17, Section 4. Alara felt a flash of embarrassment. She had assigned a lower caste aide to review the human documents, considering them too trivial for her personal attention. "I see," she said coldly. "And you are qualified to protect someone of my status?" For a brief moment, something flickered in Jack's eyes, perhaps amusement or irritation, but his face remained professional. "Yes, ma'am. I believe I am," he offered. No elaboration, no list of qualifications or achievements. Just simple certainty. Alara found his response both inadequate and strangely compelling. Among her people, such a question would have prompted a recitation of one's lineage and accomplishments. "Very well," she said. "You may escort us to my quarters." Jack nodded and turned, leading the way through the station's main concourse. Alara walked with the precise, measured steps that marked Caldari nobility, her guards maintaining perfect formation around her. The station was busier than she had expected. Humans moved quickly, their soft bodies flowing around obstacles in a way that seemed chaotic to Caldari sensibilities. They stared at Alara as she passed, some with open curiosity, others with what appeared to be suspicion. "Your people lack proper etiquette," Alara observed. "On my world, it would be unthinkable to stare at a noble." Jack glanced back at her. "Most of them have never seen a Caldari in person before. You're the first of your kind to visit the station. That does not excuse poor manners." "No, but it explains them," Jack replied. "Humans are curious by nature." They entered a less crowded corridor, and Jack slowed his pace to walk beside her. Alara noticed how he constantly scanned their surroundings, his eyes missing nothing. "The summit begins tomorrow at 0900 station time, Jack said. I'll arrive at your quarters at 0830 to escort you to the conference chamber. That will not be necessary, Ilara said. My guards can— With respect, Lady Vostel, Jack interrupted, something no Caldari would dare do. This isn't negotiable. It's station protocol, and it applies to everyone, regardless of status. Ilara's luminescent patterns flashed again, this time with indignation. You would do well to remember who you're addressing, human. I know exactly who I'm addressing, Jack said evenly. And my job is to keep you safe, not to flatter you. They reached her assigned quarters before Ilara could formulate a suitably cutting response. The door slid open to reveal a spacious set of rooms that had clearly been modified to accommodate Caldari preferences. The lighting was dimmer, and the temperature was several degrees warmer than the station standard. Your luggage has been delivered, Jack said. If you need anything, there's a communication panel by the door. My team will be stationed outside at all times. Ilara entered her quarters without acknowledging him. Her guards followed, taking up positions inside the room. Lady Vostel, Jack called before the door closed. She turned reluctantly. The humans you'll meet tomorrow, they're good people trying to build something important, just like you are. The door slid shut before she could respond. Ilara stood motionless for a moment, surprised by his words. No one had spoken to her so directly in years. On her homeworld, those of lower status approached her with elaborate verbal rituals and carefully constructed phrases. This human, this— Jack Miller spoke to her as if status didn't matter. The next morning, Ilara prepared herself for the summit with ritual precision. Her attendants polished her exoskeleton until the noble patterns gleamed. She reviewed her speaking notes one final time. When the door chimed at precisely 0830, she was ready. Jack Miller stood outside in a freshly pressed uniform, his posture perfect. Good morning, Lady Vostel, he said. Are you ready for the summit? I have been preparing for diplomatic service since before your grandparents were born, she replied. I am always ready. As they walked toward the conference chamber, Ilara noticed Jack's eyes constantly moving, assessing everyone they passed. At one point, he subtly changed their route, steering them down a different corridor. Why did we turn here? She asked. Maintenance. Issue ahead, he said simply, but Ilara had noticed how his hand had moved closer to the weapon at his hip when a group of humans had gathered near the original route. You saw something, she stated. What was it? Jack glanced at her. Just being cautious. That's my job. As they approached the conference chamber, Ilara saw the assembled human dignitaries waiting. For the first time, a flicker of uncertainty passed through her. These talks would shape relations between their species for centuries. Jack must have noticed her hesitation. They're nervous too, he said quietly. Everyone in that room wants this to work. Ilara looked at him with surprise. How did you know what I was thinking? Jack smiled slightly. I didn't, but I know what I'd be thinking in your position. He stepped back, assuming a formal stance. Good luck in there, Lady Vostel. Ilara straightened her posture and moved forward to meet the human delegation. Perhaps these talks would be more interesting than she had anticipated. 3 days passed. The talks between humans and Caldari moved slowly but steadily. Ilara found herself impressed with the human diplomats, despite herself. They lacked the elegant language of Caldari negotiators, but they were direct and practical, in ways that sometimes cut through problems her people might have spent weeks discussing. Jack Miller remained a constant presence. Each morning he arrived at exactly 0830 to escort her to the conference room. Each evening he walked her back to her quarters. He said little, but Ilara noticed how he watched everything, his eyes constantly moving, assessing. On the third evening, as they walked back after a particularly long session, Ilara decided to break the silence. "Your security measures seem excessive," she said. "Do you truly believe there is danger on this station?" Jack glanced at her. "My job is to plan for dangers that might never happen. Better to be overprepared than caught off guard. On my world, such constant vigilance would be considered a sign of paranoia." "On your world, you don't have human extremist groups," Jack replied. "Not everyone on Earth supports these talks." This was news to Elara. "There is opposition?" This was not in our briefings. Jack hesitated before answering. "There are always those who fear what's different. Most are harmless, some aren't." Before Elara could respond, the station's lights flickered. Jack stopped immediately, his body tensing. "That shouldn't happen," he said quietly. He touched the communication device on his wrist. "Miller to security control. Report status." No response came. Instead, the station's emergency alert began to sound a low, pulsing tone that grew gradually louder. "We need to move," Jack said, his voice changing from casual to commanding in an instant. Now, Elara stood her ground. "What is happening?" "I demand to know." The world exploded around them. A deafening blast shook the corridor, throwing both of them against the wall. The lights went out completely, replaced seconds later by dim red emergency lighting. Smoke filled the air. Elara found herself on the floor, disoriented but uninjured. Her exoskeleton had protected her from the impact. She looked for her guards, but they were nowhere to be seen. They had been following at a respectful distance, as was proper, and were now cut off by debris that had fallen from the ceiling. Jack was already on his feet, his weapon drawn. He helped Elara up with his free hand. "Are you hurt?" he asked, eyes scanning her for injuries. "No. What is happening?" "Some kind of attack." Jack's face was grim. "We need to get to a secure area." The station's artificial gravity wavered, making Elara stumble. Jack caught her arm, steadying her. "My guards," she began. "We can't wait for them," Jack said. "This section isn't safe." As if to emphasize his point, another explosion rocked the station, more distant this time, but still powerful enough to make the floor vibrate beneath them. The emergency lights flickered. Jack tapped his communication device again. "Miller 2. Any security personnel. Report." After several seconds of silence, he shook his head. "Communications are being jammed." Elara felt the first stirrings of genuine fear. On her homeworld, she had never been in physical danger. Her status protected her from such common threats. "This is unacceptable," she said, her voice steadier than she felt. "I am a high emissary of the Caldari Imperium. Whoever is responsible for this will face severe consequences." Jack gave her a look that might have been pity mixed with frustration. "Right now, your title doesn't matter. What matters is surviving. Whatever this is." He moved to a wall panel and pulled it open, revealing an emergency kit. He took out a small flashlight and handed it to Elara. "The main evacuation routes will be the first targets," he said. "We'll use the maintenance tunnels." "Maintenance tunnels?" Elara repeated, disbelief in her voice. "I will not crawl through. Dirty passages like some worker drone." Jack took a deep breath. "Lady Vostel, I respect your position. But right now, we have two choices. Use the tunnels or wait here for whoever set those explosions to find us." "Rescue teams will come," Elara insisted. "They will prioritize someone of my status. If communications are down, no one knows where." "You are," Jack said bluntly. "And if this is what I think it is, rescue isn't coming anytime soon." A nearby door slid partially open, then jammed. Jack immediately raised his weapon, pushing Elara behind him. After a tense moment, a human technician squeezed through the gap. Her uniform was torn and dirty, and blood ran from a cut on her forehead. "Miller," She gasped when she saw them. Thank God. Control room's gone. Direct hit. What about evacuation protocols? Jack asked. They knew exactly where to hit us, the technician said, her voice shaking. Main systems, backups, evacuation routes, all targeted in the first wave. This was planned. Jack's face hardened. Any word on who? Heard chatter before comms went down. Sounds like the pure Earth movement. Elara saw recognition and disgust flash across Jack's face. Who are these pure Earth people? She demanded. The technician looked at her with surprise, as if just noticing the alien diplomat. Human supremacists, Jack explained grimly. They oppose any contact with alien species. They think Earth should stand alone. Another explosion, closer this time, sent dust and small debris raining down from the ceiling. We need to move, Jack. Sighed. He turned to the technician. Can you make it to the emergency shelter on level 3? She nodded. I think so. The access ladder in section 14 was still intact. Go. Report our position if you can reach anyone in authority. After the technician left, Jack moved to a seemingly ordinary section of wall and pressed his hand against it in a specific pattern. A hidden panel slid open, revealing a narrow passageway. Service tunnel, he explained. It'll get us to the secondary escape pods on level 5. He looked at Elara, whose luminescent patterns were pulsing with agitation. I know this isn't what you're used to, but I promise I'll get you out of here safely. Elara stared at the dark, cramped tunnel. Everything in her training told her that a person of her status should not be reduced to crawling through walls. But the fear in the technician's eyes had been real. And despite his calm exterior, she could sense Jack's urgency. Very well, she said stiffly. Lead on, Mr. Miller. Jack nodded and entered the tunnel. Elara hesitated for just a moment before following him into the darkness, leaving behind the ordered world of diplomatic protocols and noble privileges. Ahead of them, unseen dangers waited. Behind them, explosions continued to tear through the station, destroying the carefully constructed piece they had been building just hours before. The maintenance tunnel was narrow and dark. Elara crawled behind Jack, her knees scraping against the metal floor. Her people were not built for such movement. The Caldari exoskeleton was designed for upright, dignified posture, not crawling. Through dusty passages. How much farther? She asked, trying to keep the discomfort from her voice. 2 more junctions, Jack replied. His voice echoed slightly in the confined space. Then we'll reach a vertical shaft that leads down to level 5. Elara didn't like the sound of vertical shaft, but she kept crawling. The luminescent patterns on her exoskeleton provided some light in the darkness, casting an eerie blue glow on the tunnel walls. They reached a junction where the tunnel split in 3 directions. Jack paused, consulting a small device he pulled from his pocket. Station schematics, he explained, noticing her curious look. Left here. As they turned left, a distant rumble shook the tunnel. Small bits of dust and debris rained down on them. The station's structural integrity is failing, Elara observed. Jack nodded grimly. Those explosions hit key support systems. We need to move faster. They crawled with greater urgency. Elara's arms and legs ached, but she refused to complain. She would not show weakness before this human. Finally, they reached a wider section where they could stand up. Elara rose gratefully. To her full height, nearly a head taller than Jack, he moved to a circular hatch in the floor and began turning its wheel lock. This leads to a maintenance ladder, he said. It's about 50 meters down to level 5. The hatch opened with a metallic groan. Jack shone his flashlight down, revealing a narrow shaft with ladder rungs built into the wall. Elara peered down and felt a wave of vertigo. Heights were uncommon on the Caldari homeworld, where most buildings were spread outward rather than upward. "I will go first," Jack said. "Stay close behind me." He swung himself onto the ladder with practiced ease and began descending. Elara hesitated at the edge, then carefully lowered herself onto the first rung. Her hands gripped the metal tightly as she followed Jack downward. The shaft seemed endless. The only sounds were their breathing and the occasional distant boom of another explosion. Elara focused on the rungs in front of her, trying not to think about the drop below. Jack's voice floated up from below. "You're doing great. Just 20 more meters." Elara didn't waste breath responding. She concentrated. On each movement, one rung at a time. Suddenly, a massive explosion, much closer than the previous ones, rocked the entire shaft. The ladder shuddered violently. Elara's grip slipped. "Jack!" She cried out as she lost her hold. She fell, her body scraping against the ladder and wall. In the darkness, she couldn't see how far she dropped before hitting something solid with a painful impact. Water splashed around her as she landed. The shock of the fall stunned her, and for a moment, she couldn't move. Cold liquid seeped into the joints of her exoskeleton. Pain radiated from her right leg. She tried to stand, but collapsed immediately. "Elara!" Jack's voice echoed down the shaft. The blue glow of her exoskeleton must have been visible to him. "I'm coming." She heard him descending rapidly. When he reached her, he immediately waded into the knee-deep water. "Don't move," he said, kneeling beside her. His flashlight revealed they were in a partially flooded maintenance area. Broken pipes spewed water into the space. "Where are you hurt?" "My leg," Elara said through clenched teeth. The pain was intense, unlike anything she had experienced before. "I cannot stand." Jack examined her injured leg carefully. "It's broken. The exoskeleton is cracked here." He pointed to a fracture running along her upper leg, where the natural Calderae armor had split. Elara felt a wave of fear. Damage to a Caldere's exoskeleton was serious. It didn't heal quickly like human skin. "The water," she said suddenly, noticing a strange burning sensation where it touched her. "Something is wrong with it." Jack dipped his fingers in the water and brought them to his nose. His expression darkened. Chemical contamination must have been released from damaged storage tanks. He looked at her with concern. "Is it affecting you?" Elara nodded weakly. "It burns where it touches exposed areas." She gestured to the crack in her exoskeleton, where the water had direct contact with her sensitive inner tissues. Jack immediately lifted her from the water, carrying her to a dry raised platform nearby. The movement sent waves of pain through her injured leg, but she bit back a cry. "The luminescence in your exoskeleton is dimming," Jack observed, his voice tight with worry. "Is that normal?" It wasn't. The glowing patterns that marked her noble status reflected her body's health. The dimming meant the chemicals were affecting her system. "No," she admitted. "It indicates physiological distress." Jack pulled off his uniform jacket and used it to bind her injured leg, creating a makeshift splint with pieces of debris he found nearby. His movements were quick and sure, as if he had done this many times before. "The chemicals," Elara said, her voice weaker now. "They seemed specifically harmful to Caldari biology. Normal water wouldn't affect me this way." Jack's expression hardened. This confirms it was a targeted attack. The Pure Earth group must have planted chemical agents designed to harm Caldari specifically. Elara felt cold fear spreading through her. On her homeworld, she had never faced real danger. Her status as a high noble meant she was always protected, always safe. Now, in this dark, flooded room on a damaged space station, her noble status meant nothing. "I may die here," she said, the realization striking her with unexpected clarity. "No," Jack's voice was firm. "You won't die." I won't let that happen. He opened a small medical kit from his belt and removed a universal antitoxin injector. This might help slow whatever's affecting you. It's designed for multiple species. Before she could object, he pressed the injector against the soft tissue. Exposed by her cracked exoskeleton, there was a brief sting, then a cooling sensation that provided some relief from the burning. Ilara watched Jack as he worked to treat her injuries. His face was determined, focused. No Caldari of lower status would show such concern for a noble. They would maintain proper distance and call for appropriate medical personnel. "Why are you helping me this way?" she asked. "On my world, touching a noble without permission would be punishable by imprisonment." Jack looked up from his work, surprise on his face. "Because you need help. That's all that matters right now." "I am afraid," Ilara admitted, the words feeling strange on her tongue. Among her people, showing fear was considered shameful, especially for nobles. We are taught from birth to maintain dignity even in death. But now ... Her voice trailed off. "Fear isn't weakness," Jack said gently. "It's just your body telling you something's wrong. Even the bravest people feel fear." He finished securing the splint and sat back. "The good news is we're only one level away from the escape pods. The bad news is we can't use the ladder anymore, and you can't walk." Ilara's luminescent patterns flickered weakly. "Leave me. Send help when you reach safety." Jack shook his head. "That's not how we do things." Without further discussion, he carefully lifted Ilara in his arms. She was surprised by his strength. Caldari were heavier than humans due to their exoskeletons. "This will hurt," he warned. "But I need to get you away from these chemicals into medical care." Ilara nodded, bracing herself for pain. As Jack carried her toward a door at the far end of the flooded room, she realized that for the first time in her life, her noble status truly meant nothing. Here, in this moment, she was simply a person in need, and this human was risking himself to help her. Jack carried Ilara through a narrow corridor, her injured leg carefully supported in his arms. The station's emergency lights flickered, casting long shadows on the walls. Ilara's own bioluminescence had dimmed to a faint glow, barely visible. Now, the toxins in the water had affected her more than she wanted to admit. "The environmental systems are failing," Jack said, his breathing heavy from the effort of carrying her. "Temperature controls, air filtration, they're all shutting down." As if to confirm his words, an automated voice echoed through the corridor. "Warning. Life support systems compromised. Evacuation recommended." Warning. Ilara could feel the change. In the air, it was becoming warmer, and there was a strange smell she couldn't identify. "How much farther to the escape pods?" she asked. Each word took effort now. "2 more sections," Jack replied. "We need to pass through the atmospheric processing. Unit first." He stopped at a sealed door and carefully set Ilara down, propping her against the wall. The movement sent fresh pain through her injured leg, but she remained silent. Jack examined the door's control panel, which was flashing red. "Not good," he muttered. "The atmospheric processors are overheating. There's a fire on the other side." "Is there another way around?" Ilara asked. Jack shook his head. "Not without going back up 2 levels, and I don't think you have that kind of time." He looked at her dimming exoskeleton. "The toxins in your system are spreading." Ilara knew he was right. She could feel her strength fading. Among her people, a noble's luminescence never dimmed unless they were gravely ill or dying. "What do? You propose?" she asked. Jack thought for a moment, then removed his uniform shirt. He was wearing a simple undershirt beneath it. He dipped the uniform shirt into a small water outlet on the wall, soaking it thoroughly. "Fire will be more dangerous for you than for me," he explained. Your exoskeleton contains trace minerals that become unstable at high temperatures. Elara was surprised. How do you know this about Kaldari physiology? Security briefing, Jack said simply. I make it my business to know about those I'm protecting. He wrapped the wet shirt around her head and shoulders. This will provide some protection from the heat and smoke. Keep it over your face as much as possible. He tapped a code into the door's panel, overriding the safety lockout. The door slid open, revealing a scene from nightmares. The processing chamber beyond was filled with smoke and flames. Equipment had exploded, and fires burned across the room. The heat hit them like a physical blow. I'll be quick, Jack promised. He lifted Elara again, cradling her against his chest. Then he stepped into the inferno. The heat was incredible. Elara pulled the wet cloth tighter around her face, but it did little to help. She could feel her exoskeleton growing uncomfortably warm. The minerals that gave it strength were indeed reactive to extreme heat, another fact that suggested the attackers had planned specifically to harm Kaldari. Jack moved as quickly as he could, navigating around burning debris. His exposed arms and face began to redden from the heat, but he didn't slow down. Sweat poured down his skin, and his breathing became labored in the smoke-filled air. Almost there, he gasped. A support beam crashed down just ahead of them, sending up a shower of sparks. Jack turned sideways to shield Elara from the worst of it. She felt the impact as some of the sparks hit his back, burning through his thin undershirt. You're being burned, she said, horrified. Doesn't matter, Jack replied through gritted teeth. He stepped over the fallen beam and continued forward. The exit door was visible now, just 20 meters ahead, but the path was blocked by a wall of flames where a fuel line had ruptured. Jack paused, assessing the situation. No way around, he said. We'll have to go through. It's too dangerous, Elara protested. Put me down. Save yourself. Jack looked at her, his expression resolute. That's not happening. Without further discussion, he adjusted his grip on her and ran straight toward the flames. Elara closed her eyes as they passed through the fire. She felt the terrible heat surround them, heard Jack's grunt of pain as the flames licked at his exposed skin. Then they were through, and the air was marginally cooler. Jack staggered the last few meters to the exit door and hit the emergency release. The door slid open, and they tumbled into the relatively clearer air of the next corridor. He set Elara down gently, then collapsed to his knees beside her, coughing violently. In the better light of the corridor, Elara could see the damage the fire had done. Jack's arms were covered with angry red burns. His face was smudged with soot, and parts of his undershirt had melted to his skin. Yet his first concern was still for her. Are you okay? He asked between coughs. The fire didn't damage your exoskeleton more, did it? Elara stared at him in disbelief. You're asking about me? Look at yourself. Jack shrugged, wincing as the movement pulled at his burned skin. I've had worse. He pulled a small container from his pocket and opened it to reveal a burn treatment gel. He applied some to his arms, hissing as it made contact with the raw skin. Here, Elara said, taking the container from him. Allow me. She carefully spread the gel on the burns she could reach on his shoulders and back. It was a strange reversal on her world. No noble would ever tend to someone of lower status. Thank you, Jack said when she finished. He took a deep breath and got to his feet. The escape pod bay should be just ahead. We're almost there. He helped Elara up, supporting her as she hopped on her good leg. They moved slowly down the corridor, both injured now, but determined to reach safety. Why did you do that? Elara asked after a moment of silence. Run through the fire while carrying me? Jack glanced at her. Would you have preferred I left you behind? No, but Alara struggled to express her confusion. On my world, no one would risk themselves this way for another, especially not for someone of a different species. Jack was quiet for a moment. Some humans wouldn't either, he finally said. But the best of us judge others by their actions, not their origins or status. And how have you judged me? Alara asked. I have been difficult since we met. A small smile crossed Jack's face despite his pain. You've been exactly what I'd expect from someone who's never had to face real danger before. But you're adapting. Quickly, that shows character. They reached the end of the corridor. A sign on the wall indicated the escape pod bay was just beyond the next door. Jack entered his security code, and the door slid open. The pod bay was dimly lit by emergency lights. Several of the escape pod hatches stood open, indicating they had already been used. 3 pods remained. We made it, Jack said, relief evident in his voice as they moved toward the nearest pod. A noise from the far side of the bay made them freeze. Voices were approaching human voices. Check all remaining pods, someone said. If any Kaldari are trying to escape, eliminate them. No witnesses. Jack pulled Alara behind a storage container, his finger to his lips. The pure Earth terrorists had reached the escape pod bay, and they were hunting for any surviving Kaldari. Alara's damaged exoskeleton still gave off a faint glow in the darkness. It would make them easy to spot if the terrorists came closer. She looked at Jack, silently communicating her concern. Jack nodded in understanding. He reached for his weapon, preparing to defend them both against this new threat. Jack held his weapon ready as footsteps approached their hiding place. Alara could see 3 armed men moving between the escape pods. They wore civilian clothes with crude patches showing Earth alone in space, surrounded by a protective circle, the symbol of the pure Earth movement. Cover your luminescence, Jack whispered, gesturing to her faintly glowing exoskeleton. Alara tried to dim her natural light further, but it was an involuntary response, like a human's heartbeat. She pulled Jack's wet shirt tighter around herself, hoping to block some of the glow. Anderson, check behind those containers, one of the terrorists ordered, pointing in their direction. Jack tensed. He looked at Alara and made a quick decision. Stay here, he whispered. No matter what happens, wait until they're distracted, then get to the escape pod. He pressed a small device into her hand. Emergency beacon. Activate it once you're clear of the station. Before Alara could protest, Jack slipped away, moving silently around the edge of the bay. The man called Anderson approached the containers where Alara hid. She pressed herself flatter against the floor, hoping the shadows would conceal her. Anderson was just steps away when a loud crash came from the opposite side of the room. All 3 terrorists spun toward the noise, weapons raised. Who's there? The leader called out. Show yourself. Jack stepped into view on the far side of the bay, his hands raised. He had deliberately knocked over some equipment to draw their attention. Just me, he said calmly. Station security? The leader laughed. Security? Not doing a great job, are you? This station is falling apart. You're making a mistake, Jack said. This attack won't stop human-Kaldari relations. It will only make them stronger. Shut up, the leader snapped. Where's the alien diplomat? Our sources said she was headed this way. Jack shrugged. No idea. I was escorting a human ambassador. We got separated in the explosions. The leader studied Jack suspiciously, noticing his burns. What happened to you? Fire in the processing unit. Had to run through it. Anderson moved closer to Jack, his weapon pointed at Jack's chest. He's lying. Security would have an earpiece and full uniform. This guy's half-dressed and alone. The leader nodded. Where's the Kaldari, security man? Tell us, and maybe we let you live. Go to hell, Jack replied evenly. The leader sighed dramatically. Have it your way? He raised his weapon. Anderson Peters, check all the pods again after I deal with this hero. Elara watched in horror from her hiding place. Jack had deliberately sacrificed himself to draw attention away from her. She couldn't let him die for her. Without thinking about her noble status or proper protocol, she made a decision. Using all her remaining strength, Elara stood up behind the container. I am here, she announced, her voice ringing with the authority of her position. I am Lady Elara Vostel, High Emissary of the Kaldari Imperium. All three terrorists turned toward her, momentarily surprised. It was the distraction Jack needed. In one fluid motion, he drew a second weapon hidden at his ankle and fired. The leader dropped instantly. Before the others could react, Jack fired twice more. Both men fell. The sudden violence was shocking to Elara. On her world, conflicts were resolved through elaborate political maneuvering, not direct confrontation. Jack quickly checked that all three terrorists were incapacitated, then hurried to. Elara sighed. I told you to stay hidden, he said, but there was no anger in his voice, only concern. They were going to kill you, Elara replied simply. Jack helped her toward the nearest escape pod. Can you walk a few more steps? Elara nodded, though every movement sent pain through her injured leg. The toxins in her system were making her weaker by the minute. They had almost reached the pod when a fourth terrorist, previously unseen, emerged from behind one of the other pods. He raised his weapon and fired. Jack pushed Elara aside, taking the shot in his shoulder. He staggered, but stayed on his feet, returning fire. A terrorist fell. Jack! Elara caught him as he stumbled. I'm okay, he said through gritted teeth, though blood was spreading across his undershirt. Get in the pod. The escape pod was designed for 4 people. Jack helped Elara inside, then collapsed into a seat beside her. His face was pale from blood loss, his burned skin raw and blistered. Set coordinates for the emergency rendezvous point, he instructed, his voice weaker now. The autopilot will do the rest. Elara followed his directions, her long fingers moving over the unfamiliar controls. The pod's hatch sealed with a hiss, and the engines powered up. Launching in 10 seconds, the pod's computer announced. Jack leaned back in his seat, pressing a hand to his wounded shoulder. Sorry about the rough trip, he said, attempting a smile. Not exactly the diplomatic experience you were expecting. Elara looked at this human who had carried her through fire, who had been burned and shot protecting her. No, she agreed softly. It was far more educational. The pod launched with a jolt, breaking free from the damaged station. Through the small viewport, Elara could see the once proud structure of Unity Station, now scarred by explosions and venting atmosphere in several places. The other diplomats, she said suddenly. What of them? Emergency protocols would have evacuated the conference areas first, Jack replied. Your fellow delegates were probably among the first to escape. Elara nodded, relieved. Then a wave of dizziness swept over her as the toxins continued their work. Her vision blurred. Jack noticed immediately. He pulled a medical kit from under his seat and removed another antitoxin injector. This is my last one, he said. It should help until we reach the rendezvous point. Medical ships will be waiting there. After administering the injection, Jack slumped back in his seat. Blood loss and his own injuries were taking their toll. Elara found herself reaching out to steady him as the pod rocked slightly in the vacuum of space. Thank you, she said simply. Jack looked at her with tired eyes. For what? For carrying me when I fell? For running through fire with me in your arms? For valuing my life when my status meant nothing? Jack's eyes drifted closed. Just doing my job, he murmured. No, Elara said firmly. It was far more than duty. 3 hours later, their pod docked with a large medical ship, Emergency teams rushed to meet them. Alara insisted they attend to Jack first, overriding the medical staff's protocol to prioritize. The Caldari diplomat died in the days that followed. As both recovered in the medical ship's facilities, news arrived that the terrorist plot had been contained. Most diplomats had escaped safely, though the station had suffered severe damage. Jack's actions in helping Alara escape had been reported by other security personnel who survived, and he was being hailed as a hero. When Alara was well enough to leave the medical bay, she found Jack sitting in the ship's observation lounge, his arm in a sling, his burns healing under specialized bandages. "They tell me you're returning to your homeworld tomorrow," he said as she joined him. Alara nodded. "Yes, but I will return for the renewed talks. This attack has not deterred my people's interest in relations with humans. If anything, it has strengthened it." She hesitated, then reached up to touch the luminescent patterns on her exoskeleton. They had regained their bright glow as the toxins were purged from her system. With careful movements, she traced a new pattern alongside the traditional markings of her noble status. "What are you doing?" Jack asked, curious. "Adding a new symbol to my status markings," Alara explained. "It represents protection and alliance. It will remind me and tell others. That status means nothing when you're falling. What matters is who's willing to catch you and carry you through fire." Jack smiled, understanding the profound change this represented in the formal Caldari. "Diplomat, I look forward to working with you on the renewed talks, Lady Vostel," he said. Alara shook her head slightly. "When we are not in formal settings, please call me Alara." It was a small gesture by human standards, but for a Caldari noble, it represented a revolutionary break with Tradition 1. That might just form the foundation for a deeper understanding between their species.